As you know, the President welcomed the Emir of Qatar to the White House today. The two leaders discussed the strategic relationship and our cooperation on a wide range of security and economic issues. This includes efforts to bolster their military capabilities.
Only adds fuel to the fire. What binds these two incidents is that they don't appear to be caused by the kind of negligence that allows typical data breaches to happen. Instead, they both appear to be the result of people exploiting the very tools that you've created to manipulate users' information. I know Facebook has taken several steps and intends to take more to address these issues. Nevertheless, some have warned that the actions Facebook is taking to ensure that third parties don't
abilities and to advance new commercial deals that would create tens of thousands of American jobs. The Emir reiterated his commitment to counter terrorist financing and violent extremism. As you may recall, just a few weeks ago, Qatar publicly designated 20 terrorist financiers and 6 entities. This is the latest in a series of important steps, but the President and Emir agreed that there is more progress to be made. We are committed to partnering in that effort. Finally, the two leaders discussed the urgent need to resolve the Gulf dispute.
Obtain data from unsuspecting users, while necessary, will actually serve to enhance Facebook's own ability to market such data exclusively. Most of us understand that whether you're using Facebook or Google,
the United States must be able to work jointly with the United Gulf Cooperation Council to promote regional security and stability and to stand against Iran's dangerous activities. Also, as you may have seen, the President spoke this morning with British Prime Minister Theresa May.
Or some other online services, we are trading certain information about ourselves for free or low-cost services. But for this model to persist, both sides of the bargain need to know the stakes that are involved. Right now, I'm not...
Both leaders condemned Syrian President Assad's vicious disregard for human life and agreed not to allow the use of chemical weapons to continue. To that end, the President will not attend the Summit of the Americas or travel to Colombia as originally scheduled. The Vice
convinced that Facebook's users have the information that they need to make meaningful choices. In the past, many of my colleagues on both sides of the aisle have been willing to defer to tech companies' efforts to regulate themselves. But this may be changing.
The President will travel to the summit in his place and will meet with the Colombian President while he's there in Peru. President Trump will remain in the United States to oversee the American response to Syria and to monitor developments around the world. Looking ahead to this afternoon,
just last month, in overwhelming bipartisan fashion, Congress voted to make it easier for prosecutors and victims to go after websites that knowingly facilitate sex trafficking. This should be a wake-up call for the tech community. We want to hear more, without delay, about what Facebook and other companies plan to do to take greater responsibility for what happens on their platforms. How will you protect users' data? How will you inform users about the changes that you are making?
The President is pleased to welcome the University of Alabama Crimson Tide football team to the White House in celebration of their 17th national championship. Pretty sure that was written by somebody from Alabama. Coach Saban, UA President Bell, and the team captains will meet with President Trump in the Oval Office, and the group will then join the rest of the team and hundreds of Tide fans out on the South Lawn, and that event will, of course, be open to the press. And with that, I will take your questions. And because it is her birthday, Nadia, I'm going to go with you, and happy birthday.
Thank you. And how do you intend to proactively stop harmful conduct instead of being forced to respond to it months or years later? Mr. Zuckerberg, in many ways, you and the company that you've created, the story that you've created represents...
The President authorized the use of military force last year after President Assad used chemical weapons, but this didn't seem to deter him. The President talked yesterday of a very strong and serious response now. How...
...represent the American dream. Many are incredibly inspired by what you've done. At the same time, you have an obligation, and it's up to you, to ensure that that dream doesn't become a privacy nightmare for the scores of people who use it.
He's going to hold President Assad accountable.
I'm sorry, can you repeat the last part of the question?
How he's going Hold President Assad accountable now?
The president's been clear. We're working with our partners and allies and our national security team to look at all options. And as we've said, all options are on the table, but I'm not.
Facebook. This hearing is an opportunity to speak to those who believe in Facebook and to those who are deeply skeptical about it. We're listening. America is listening.
Not going to get ahead of anything the president may or may not do in response to what's taking place in Syria. Jonathan.
Sir, talking about the raid on Michael Cohen's office, the president said it's an attack on our country, it's an attack on what we all stand for, and what
The world is listening too.
Thank you. Now, Ranking Member Feinstein.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, Chairman Grassley, Chairman Thune. Thank you both for holding this hearing. Mr. Zuckerberg, thank you for being here. You have a real opportunity this afternoon to lead the industry and demonstrate a meaningful commitment to protecting individual privacy. We have learned over the past few months, and we've learned a great deal that's learned.
way is an FBI raid on Michael Cohen's office an attack on our country?
I think that the president has been clear that he thinks that this has gone too far, and beyond that, I don't have anything to add, but I'd refer you back to the president's comments.
But that accounts to an attack on our country?
Again, I think the president has been clear what his position is. I don't have anything else to add at this point.
Does the president believe he has the power to fire Special Counsel Robert Mueller? Does he believe that's within his power?
Certainly believes he has the power to do so. John.
If I could, you've said several times from the podium that the president has neither the intent.
Alarming. We've seen how foreign actors are abusing social media platforms like Facebook to interfere in elections and take millions of Americans' personal information without their knowledge.
Nor is thinking about firing Robert Mueller. Does that remain the case today?
The president was asked this question directly last night, and I'd refer you back to his comments.
Can I also ask, what about Rob Rosenstein? What's the president's thinking about Rosenstein in terms of his tenure at the Department of Justice? He did not.
To manipulate public opinion and target individual voters. Specifically, on February the 16th, Special Counsel Mueller issued an indictment against the Russia-based Internet Research Agency and 13 of its employees for interfering operations targeting the United States. Through this 37-page indictment, we learned that the IRA
appeared to be very happy with him last night. And can you confirm that Rosenstein was the high-level DOJ official that signed off on the FBI raid?
I'd refer you to the Department of Justice in terms of their process.
Campaign through 470 Facebook accounts and pages. The campaign included ads and false information to create discord and harm Secretary Clinton's campaign.
The president's voiced his frustrations, but beyond that, I don't have anything else. Shannon?
Is the president still open to talking to Mueller, or is he still open to an interview?
That's something that I would direct you to the president's personal attorneys to answer that question.
I would ask about Rosenstein. What about FBI Director Wray? He was the one who signed off supposedly on this FBI raid. Does the president still have confidence in him?
Again, I would refer you to the Department of Justice on the process and who did or did not sign off. That's not something that we were a part of here.
The president's feelings about the FBI director, does he have...
Intent was seen by an estimated 157 million Americans. A month later, on March 17th, news broke that Cambridge Analytica exploited the personal information.
Concerns about the FBI
The president's voiced his frustration with the situation. I haven't spoken with him directly about Director Wray. Jill?
Two things, just to follow up on that. Has the president spoken with either Jeff Sessions or Rosenstein since the raid yesterday?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay, and then I want to ask you about the decision to cancel the trip. Can you walk us...
Approximately 50 million Facebook users without their knowledge or permission. And last week, we learned that number was even higher. 87 million Facebook users who had their private information taken without their consent. Specifically, using a personality quiz he created, Professor Cohen collected the personal information of 300,000 Facebook users and then collect
through a little bit more of the decision-making there, why the president felt like he couldn't make a decision, he couldn't execute on whatever he decides to do while he's traveling, considering that the missile strike last year was actually launched while the president was in Mar-a-Lago.
Mar-a-Lago happens to be within the United States, something I'm sure you're very well aware of. The president would like to stay in the country while there are a lot of developments going on around the world.
What does being in the country, how does that benefit him?
Again, I'm not going to get into specifics on intel matters and things that we may or may not do, but the
millions of their friends. It appears the information collected included everything these individuals had on their Facebook pages, and according to some reports, even included private direct.
President and his national security team felt it was best that he stay in the United States while all of these developments are taking place. Jacqueline.
Does Michael Cohen still represent the president?
I'm not sure. I would refer you to Michael Cohen on that.
And when did the president first learn of the
users? Professor Cohen is said to have taken data from over 70 million Americans. It has also been reported that he sold this data to Cambridge Analytica for $800,000.
Payment from Michael Cohen to Stormy Daniels and their non-disclosure agreement?
I'm not sure on the exact timing. Kristen, sorry, I'm going to keep moving because we're tight on time.
Just one more question, Sarah. If the president
sorry, Jacqueline, I'm going to keep moving. Go ahead, Kristen.
Then why didn't he instruct?
I'm going to move on to Kristen. Sorry, we were tight on time with.
Cambridge Analytica then took this data and created a psychological welfare tool to influence United States elections. In fact, the CEO, Alexander Nix, declared that Cambridge Analytica ran all the digital campaign, the television campaign, and its data informed all the strategy for the Trump campaign. The reporting has also speculated that Cambridge Analytica worked.
The visit of the Alabama team coming up soon. Go ahead.
Well, just can you follow up on that question? Does he continue to deny having an affair?
Then why doesn't he just?
The president's been clear. He's addressed this several times. I don't have anything else to add. Brian?
I'd like to follow up. Ask my other question. Can you just say definitively, has the president had any conversations about firing Jeff Sessions, Rod Rosenstein, or Robert Mueller in the past 24 hours?
I haven't had any conversations with him on that. I can't speak beyond that at this point. Sorry, Kristen, we've got to keep going, guys.
He called it a witch hunt, but Rod Rosenstein, whom he appointed, signed off.
Research agency to help Russia identify which American voters to target with its propaganda. I'm concerned that press reports indicate Facebook learned about the
lady going to do it.
Go ahead.
Well, I answer her. Go ahead, Kristen.
Can you just answer the question? If the president appointed Rod Rosenstein, and so how can he call the raid yesterday a witch hunt when it was approved by the deputy attorney?
2015, but appears not to have taken significant steps to address it until this year. So this hearing is important, and I appreciate the conversation we had yesterday. And
General he appointed.
Once again, I'm not aware of what the process is and who signs off on those specific types of things. The president certainly has been very clear about what his position is when it comes to matters of collusion, and that's what his reference is.
At Facebook, through your presence here today and the words you're about to tell us, will indicate how strongly your industry will regulate and or reform the platforms that they control. I believe this is extraordinarily important. You lead a big company with 27,000 employees, and we very much look forward to your comments. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Feinstein.
He thinks this entire thing is a witch hunt. I think we've spoken about this at length, ad nauseum, and frankly think it's a big distraction that the media has spent every single day for the last year focused on this instead of some of the biggest issues of our day and some of the biggest issues that the president is dealing with, like Syria, like North Korea, like deregulation, tax cuts, defeating ISIS. That's the focus of this administration, and frankly, that's what you guys should spend a little bit more time on. Hey guys, time out. You yielded your.
Facebook mirrors that of many of our technological giants. Founded by Mr. Zuckerberg in 2004, Facebook has exploded over the past 14 years. Facebook currently has over 2 billion monthly.
Time to Kristen. I'm going to go to John.
Please, if I
Sorry.
may, just to follow up.
All right, I'll come back to you, Brian, for one.
Thanks. You had said that
I'm
it
feeling
is a witch.
generous today
Thank you. Thank
for
you.
Nadia's birthday.
Just two quick ones. You said that it's a witch hunt, and you've continued to characterize it as that. But
Users across the world, over 25,000 employees and offices in 13 U.S. cities and various other countries. Like their expanding user base, the data collected on Facebook users has...
as much as this administration also has leveled sanctions against the 13 Russians that were indicted by the Mueller investigation, in some point, are you a party to this witch hunt, or is some of it at least a legitimate effort?
Just because they're...
They have moved on from schools, likes, and relationship statuses. Today, Facebook has access to dozens of data points, ranging from ads that you've clicked on, events you've attended, and your location based upon your mobile device. It is no secret that Facebook makes money off this data through advertising revenue, although many seem confused by or altogether.
May have been involvement by Russia doesn't mean there was involvement by the Trump campaign. To try to conflate the two is insane.
No, that's not the question. The question is, in some ways, aren't you at least supporting what they've done, because they've indicted some of the people that you have leveled sanctions against? So you're in agreement with Mueller in at least
this fact. Facebook generated $40 billion in revenue in 2017, with about 98% coming from advertising across Facebook and Instagram. Significant.
Some regards, right?
We've been outspoken on a number of occasions that we think that Russia was involved in election meddling, and we've taken actions because of that. But that has nothing to do with whether or not the president and his campaign had anything to do with that.
That wasn't my, and then
I'm not. Sorry, I'm going to keep moving. John, I called on John before. Guys, one at a time. Go ahead, John.
Thanks a lot, Sarah.
Sorry, right here.
Thanks a lot, Sarah. What
Kinda
is
crazy today.
What is the nature of the president's relationship right now?
Election is also occurring at Google, Twitter, Apple, and Amazon, and even an ever-expanding portfolio of products and services offered by these companies grant endless opportunities.
Attorney General Jeff Sessions, he really voices his pleasure with him last evening in his remarks. Is it a good relationship? Does he risk being fired right now?
I think the president was pretty clear about his frustrations when he spoke about that last night. Michael?
One other one, real quick, Sarah.
Increasing amounts of information on their customers. As we get more free or extremely low-cost services, the trade-off for the American consumer is to provide more personal data. The potential for further growth and innovation based on collection of data is limitless. However, the potential for abuse is also significant. While the contours of the Cambridge Analytica...
If you don't mind, it's about the EPA administrator, Mr. Pruitt. If it turns out that he lied in the interview that he gave with Fox News, my colleague Ed Henry, would that be problematic for him in terms of holding on to his job?
I'm not going to get into
situation are still coming to light. There was clearly a breach of consumer trust and a likely improper transfer of data. The Judiciary Committee will hold a separate hearing exploring Cambridge
situations, but certainly the president would expect all members of his cabinet to be honest and certainly open with the public. Michael?
So the president last night seemed to combine his reaction to the Russia investigation, which we've heard him say before, and this new investigation that has grown out of the raids in New York of his attorney. Does he view that as one and the same investigation? In other words, does he think that's all kind of under...
and other data privacy issues. More importantly, though, these events have ignited a larger discussion on consumers' expectations and the future of data privacy in our society. It is exposed...
of the special counsel, or does he view the Russia investigation as separate from the probe into the payments by these women that is apparently being conducted by the U.S. Attorney's Office in New York?
I think certainly that they are separate.
Those that consumers may not fully understand or appreciate the extent to which their data is collected, protected, transferred, used, and misused. Data has been used in advertising and political campaigns.
Investigations, but I think that publicly they have been conflated quite a bit.
Steve? Yes, Sarah. Does the United States expect that in a response to the Syria chemical weapons attack that other nations...
For decades. The amount and type of data obtained, however, has seen a very dramatic change. Campaigns including Presidents Bush, Obama, and Trump all use these increasing amounts of data to focus on micro-targeting and personalization over numerous social media platforms, and especially Facebook. In fact, President Obama's
going in. Specifically, we're seeing indications from France and the Saudis that they may also take military action.
We've had a number of conversations, both the president with President Macron, Prime Minister May, and
campaign developed an app utilizing the same Facebook feature as Cambridge Analytica to capture the information of not just the app's users, but millions of their friends. The digital director for that campaign
at various other levels, not just with those countries, but others at an administration level. And we're going to continue to work with a number of our partners and allies as we determine what the next best steps are. April?
Sarah, two questions. The president said yesterday he was compliant. They turned over 1 million documents. If he was compliant with these investigations, why was there a search warrant needed?
This doesn't have anything to do with the president, and I would refer you to Michael Cohen and his attorney. When it comes to matters of the special counsel and dealings with the president, we've
campaign for 2012 described the data scraping app as something that would, quote, wind up being the most groundbreaking piece of technology developed for this campaign, end of quote.
Been fully cooperative.
Okay, and the next question. With all of this turmoil, particularly this last week, has the president at any time thought about stepping down before or now?
No, and I think that's an absolutely ridiculous question. I gave you 2 questions, April. We're moving on.
So the effectiveness of these social media tactics can be debated, but their use over the past years across the political spectrum and their increased significance cannot be ignored.
Jordan, go ahead.
It's not ridiculous.
Thanks, Sarah. Did the National Security Advisor John Bolton force Tom Bossert out of his job?
I'm not going to get into specific details about the ongoings of personnel, but I can tell you that he resigned.
A policy towards data privacy and security must keep pace with these changes. Data privacy should be tethered to consumer needs and expectations. Now, at a minimum, consumers must have the transparency necessary to make an informed decision about whether to share their data and how it can be used. Consumers ought to have clear information, not opaque policies and complex click-through consent.
The president feels he's done a great job and wishes him the best as he moves forward.
Sarah, the president tweeted favorably today about some of the promises that President Xi has made toward instituting some market reforms in China, but he said this before.
Pages. The tech industry has an obligation to respond to widespread and growing concerns over data privacy and security and to restore the public's trust. The status quo no longer.
Or is this going to be enough to avert some of these tariffs that the president's been talking about instituting?
Certainly, we are encouraged by President Xi's words and his kind words, but at the same time, we want to see concrete actions from China, and we're going to continue moving forward in the process and in the negotiations until those happen. Pamela?
Has the president spoken with Michael Cohen since the raids?
Not that I'm aware of.
And can I just ask you, you said that he believes he views this as sort of crossing the line. Can you explain a little bit more why these raids on his personal attorney
works? Moreover, Congress must determine if and how we need to strengthen privacy standards to ensure transparency and understanding for the billions of consumers who utilize these products. Senator.
Is viewed by the president as crossing the line?
I don't have anything else to add on that front right now. Right here in the front.
Clarify something you said earlier. You said the president believes he has the power to fire Robert Mueller because usually most legal experts believe that he would have to order Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein to fire Mueller, and Rosenstein could, of course.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Zuckerberg, good afternoon. Let me just cut to the chase. If you and other social media companies do not get your act in order, none of us are going to have
Refuse. I know a number of individuals in the legal community, and including at the Department of Justice, that he has the power to do so, but I don't have any further announcements on.
Consistently said that it is. They've told me, I've asked. They've said that it's Rod Rosenstein oversees special counsel, and only he
have any privacy anymore. That's what we're facing. We're talking about personally identifiable information that, if not kept by the social media companies from theft, a value that we have in America being our personal privacy, we won't have it anymore. It's the advent of technology, and of course all of us are part of it.
He has the power to fire the special counsel.
Again, we've been advised that the president certainly has the power to make that decision. I can't go anything beyond that. Dave?
Sarah, thanks. The British government said they're still looking for confirmation that Assad.
From the moment that we wake up in the morning until we go to bed, we're on those handheld tablets. And online companies like Facebook are tracking our activities.
Used chemical weapons last weekend. Is the president still looking for confirmation of that?
I can't get into specific classified information, but I can tell you we feel confident in the comments that we've made up until this point. John?
Thank you, Sarah. Two questions with brevity on Ambassador Bolton. With the resignation,
We'll believe it when we see it, right?
resignations of Michael Anton and now Tom Bossert, can we expect any other changes of personnel in his family?
I don't have any other personnel announcements to make.
And collecting information. Facebook has a responsibility to protect this personal information. We had a good discussion yesterday.
Make it this time, but we'll certainly keep you guys posted.
Right. A year ago, Ambassador Bolton was highly critical in op-ed pages about U.S. involvement with the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund. With the World Bank IMF meeting coming.
We went over all of this. You told me that the company had failed to do so. It's not the first time that Facebook has mishandled its users' information. The FTC found that Facebook
up within a matter of 2 weeks. Is his position going to affect U.S. support for either institution?
I don't have any policy changes on that front at this time and don't expect any on that front. Francesca?
Facebook's privacy policies had deceived users in the past. And in the present case, we recognize that Cambridge Analytica and an app developer lied to consumers and lied to you, lied to Facebook. But did Facebook watch over the operations? We want to know that. And why didn't Facebook notify 87 million users that their personal...
Thank you, Sarah. Yesterday, President Trump said something very interesting about Syria. He said that because of the power of the United States and because of the power of our country, we're able to stop it. Now, with bringing in Ambassador John Bolton as well, which is sort of a signal of...
identifiable information had been taken. And it was being also used, why were they not informed, for unauthorized political purposes?
Of a more hawkish stance, potentially. I want to know if the president has changed his calculus in any way on Syria and on whether or not he wants to pull out those troops very soon, as he previously said.
I addressed the troops yesterday. I don't have anything new on that front in terms of things that the president may or may not do. We're not going to broadcast, and I don't have any announcements on that front. Fred?
Oh, thanks, sir. This week, Senator McConnell said they're taking up 6 nominations, and that they're going to continue taking up 6 nominations.
So only now, and I appreciate our conversation, only now Facebook has pledged to inform those consumers whose accounts were compromised. I think you're...
Do you consider that a major breakthrough for the administration, considering there's been
we'd like to
so
see
many
them take on a lot more than 6, but we're certainly glad to see those 6 move forward, but we'd like to see them move forward in a much bigger fashion than just a single digit.
Genuine. I got that sense in conversing with you. You want to do the right thing. You want to enact reforms. We want to know if it's going to be enough. And I hope that will be in the answer.
Right now.
And one other question. On U.S. Attorney Berman, he's in an interim position now in New York. The reports have been that the president was going to nominate him for full-time. Is that still the case? Will the president nominate him?
I don't have any personnel announcements on that front.
Today. Now, since we still don't know what Cambridge Analytica has done with this data, you heard Chairman Thune say, as we have discussed, we want to haul Cambridge Analytica in to answer these questions at a separate hearing. I want to thank Chairman Thune for working with all of us on scheduling a hearing. There's obviously a great deal.
Thanks, Sarah. So, all of the evidence so far in the Syrian chemical attack points to the use of chlorine gas. The Assad regime has been suspected of using chlorine multiple times on the battlefield. What makes this particular attack different and warrant the international
deal of interest in this subject? I hope we can get to the bottom of this. And if Facebook and other online companies will not or cannot fix the privacy invasions
response and the potential use of lethal force that we're seeing from this president.
I can't address specific intelligence matters, but I think everyone around the world can see why these recent attacks are so horrific. Beyond that, I can't get into any other details. Eamon?
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. To clarify your comment here on Xi Jinping's speech last night, it was seen as rhetoric around trade openness. And are you saying that the president didn't see anything in that speech that would encourage him to back off on his threat to impose tariffs on the Chinese?
We certainly think it's a step in the right direction, and we're encouraged.
Then we are going to have to, we, the Congress, how can American consumers trust folks like your company to be caretakers of their most
by the words, but we want to see concrete steps and concrete action by the Chinese. In the meantime, we're going to continue moving forward.
What specific actions do you want to see from the Chinese? What could they do here to stave off those tariffs at this point?
This is going to be something that's part of private negotiations that we have with the
personal and identifiable information. And that's the question. Thank you.
Thank you, my colleagues and Senator Nelson. Our witness today is Mark Zuckerberg, founder, chairman, chief executive officer of Facebook. Mr. Zuckerberg's launched Facebook, and at that time he was a student at Harvard University. As I mentioned previously, his company now has over
Chinese, but certainly we want to see more than just the rhetoric, but we think that's a very good sign and moving in the right direction. If you got time for one last question, Blake.
And to pick up, and I guess I missed that, I don't know.
I didn't hear it, so
yeah.
I think they were saying they thought you were great. I'm pretty sure that was it.
$40 billion of annual revenue and over 2 billion monthly active users. Mr. Zuckerberg, along with his wife, also established the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative to further fill
to pick up and end off where Eamon just what he was just talking about. You said you want to see concrete actions from the Chinese as it relates to trade. Do you feel that there will actually be at some point concrete actions, or is all of this right now hope and talk? And
causes. I now turn to you. Welcome to the committee. and whatever your statement is orally, if you have a longer one, it'll be included in the record. So proceed, sir.
Chairman Grassley, Chairman Thune.
We certainly hope so. We think this is an encouraging step in the right direction, but at the same time, we're going to continue moving forward in the actions that the president has announced, and hopeful that we see something come out of the Chinese government.
It feels almost today like it's been somewhat of a lukewarm reception. Is that accurate?
No, as the president himself said, he appreciates President Xi's kind words, but we want to see more than just words. We want to see action, and that's what we're focused on pushing forward, is making.
Ranking Member Feinstein and Ranking Member Nelson and members of the committee, we face a number of important issues around privacy, safety, and democracy, and you will rightfully have some hard questions for me to answer. Before I talk about the steps we're taking,
Making sure that we stop the unfair trade practices. That's been what the president's committed to, not just rhetoric, but actual action. Thanks so much, and we'll see you guys out on the South Lawn as we welcome the Crimson Tide.
To address them, I want to talk about how we got here. Facebook is an idealistic and optimistic company. For most of our existence, we focused on all of the good that connecting people can do. And as Facebook has grown, people everywhere have gotten a powerful new tool for staying connected to the people they love, for making their voices heard, and for building communities and businesses. Just recently, we've seen the Me Too movement and the March for Our Lives organized, at least in part, on Facebook.
Hi there, and welcome to the briefing room. I'm ABC News political director.
After Hurricane Harvey, people came together to raise more than $20 million for relief. And more than 70 million small businesses use Facebook to create jobs and grow. But it's clear now that we didn't do enough to...
And joined here by our senior justice correspondent, Pierre Thomas, and Mary Alice Parks from our political team. We are tracking big developments at both ends of Pennsylvania Avenue. The White House briefing just wrapping up. We also are watching what's going on at Capitol Hill, where Mark Zuckerberg's testimony, the Facebook founder and CEO, talking before Congress, an extraordinary couple of days there. But let's start with the big headline that's impacting this White House, Pierre. News yesterday that Michael Cohen, the president's personal attorney, or at least was, we heard from the White House today, they can't even verify that he's still working for the White House, despite what the president said just last week. But search warrants served on Michael Cohen. First,
prevent these tools from being used for harm as well. And that goes for fake news, for foreign interference in elections, and hate speech, as well as developers and data privacy. We didn't take a broad enough view of our responsibility, and that was a big mistake.
How extraordinary is this, and how big a deal is this to know that this investigation is headed in that direction?
Extremely unusual. We're talking about someone who the president has known for more than a decade, also a person who's done legal work for him.
And it was my mistake, and I'm sorry. I started Facebook, I run it, and I'm responsible for what happens here. So now we have to go through all of our relationship with people and
so the steps that the Justice Department would go through in terms of getting this approved would be many layered and not taken lightly at all. As far as what we know, the Special Counsel's Office uncovered some evidence that was of concern to them because they were not quite...
Make sure that we're taking a broad enough view of our responsibility. It's not enough to just connect people. We have to make sure that those connections are positive. It's not enough to just give people a voice. We need to make sure that people aren't using it to harm other people or to spread misinformation. And it's not enough to just give people control over their information. We need to make sure that the developers they share it with protect their information too. Across the board, we have a responsibility to not just build tools, but to make sure that they're used for...
Sure it fit within the parameters of their jurisdiction. They went to the Deputy Attorney General, Rod Rosenstein, who's the acting AG on this matter, and said, okay, what say you? Rosenstein at that point could have expanded Mueller's authority to look into...
Good. It will take some time to work through all the changes we need to make across the company, but I'm committed to getting this right. This includes the basic responsibility of protecting people's information, which we failed to do with Cambridge Analytica.
This matter, He chose not to do that. He sent it up to the Southern District of New York as a referral. They made an assessment and subsequently got a warrant or warrants from a federal judge and pursued the case.
So it doesn't sound like a fishing expedition. I think it's also fair to say, despite what the president said, this is not an attack on our country. I mean, Kara Sanders was asked about that again right now, Pierre, but this is a deliberative process that suggests that investigators have something or suspect that they're going to get something.
When you talk to law enforcement officials, they call it the rule.
So here are a few things that we are doing to address this and to prevent it from happening again. First, we're getting to the bottom of exactly what Cambridge Analytica did and telling everyone affected. What we know now...
Rule of law. Basically, you have a situation where investigators find potential evidence of something, and there's a set of procedures that they have to go through and that they follow. These Justice Department guidelines, which we've heard about in recent months about...
is that Cambridge Analytica improperly accessed some information about millions of Facebook members by buying it from an app developer. That information, this was information that people generally share publicly on their Facebook pages, like names and their profile picture and the pages they follow. When we first contacted Cambridge Analytica, they told us that they had deleted the data. About a month ago, we heard new reports that suggested that wasn't true. And now we're working with government.
Whether that was adhered to during the Clinton email scandal. And the reason why you're hearing so much about it is those guidelines matter. And in terms of when you stray from them or when you don't adhere to them, problems result. And the one thing that you're getting from law enforcement
in the U.S., the U.K., and around the world to do a full audit of what they've done and to make sure they get rid of any data they may still have. Second, to make sure no other app developers out there are misusing data, we're now investigating every single app that...
Officials who used to work at the Justice Department is that this kind of thing would have received a hell of a lot of scrutiny before it could go forward.
And not only because you always have to go through scrutiny and get a judge to sign off on a search warrant, present probable cause like Pierre's talking about, but also because there's an even higher bar when you're talking about a lawyer's office and a lawyer who represents a very unique client here, the President of the United States. So we know they would have had to have reached an even higher bar.
And John Carl joining us now at the White House. You asked Sarah Sanders to back up that claim.
Had access to a large amount of information in the past. And if we find that someone improperly used data, we're going to ban them from Facebook and tell everyone affected. Third, to prevent this from ever happening again going forward, we're making sure that developers can access...
That the president made that this is an attack on our country. No real answer on that. And what's the sense now of the White House rage meter? What's the president prepared to do as a result of what is clearly his anger at these developments?
Well, I also asked Rick...
This is much information now. The good news here is that we already made big changes to our platform in 2014 that would have prevented this specific situation with Cambridge Analytica from occurring again today. But there's more to do, and you can find more.
If the president believes he has the authority to fire the special counsel, as you know, the special counsel statute says that that can only be done by the attorney general, which in this case, the attorney general in this matter is actually the deputy attorney general because of the recusal of Jeff.
More details on the steps we're taking in my written statement. My top priority has always been our social mission of connecting people, building community, and bringing the world closer together. Advertisers and developers will never take priority over that as long as I'm running Facebook. I started Facebook when I was in college. We've come a long way since then. We now serve more than 2 billion people around the world, and every day, people use our services to stay connected with the
sessions. But Sarah said definitively the president certainly believes he has the power to do so when I asked if he believed he had the power to fire him. So clearly it is something that the president believes is within his authority. It is something that he has talked about.
People that matter to them most. I believe deeply in what we're doing. And I know that when we address these challenges, we'll look back and view helping people connect and giving more people a voice as a positive force in the world. I realized
with his aides, you heard him say last night that many people have told him he should fire him. The rage meter, it's pretty high right now. But I'm also told on the other side of this, Rick, by people that are close to the president, people who advise him here in this building, that he has been told by some of his most important allies on Capitol Hill that it would be a terrible mistake to fire Mueller, that it would result in a constitutional crisis, that he could even face impeachment as a result of...
The issues we're talking about today aren't just issues for Facebook and our community. They're issues and challenges for all of us as Americans. Thank you for having me here today, and I'm ready to take your questions.
I'll remind members that maybe you weren't here when...
Of such an action. And I am told that he understands that. He's been told that he understands it. But nobody can say definitively what he's going to do on this because he was already outraged going into this, and now the outrage is more than it has ever been.
I had my opening comments that we are operating under the 5-minute rule, and that applies to the 5-minute rule, and that applies to those of us who are chairing the committee as well.
Yeah, we're going to let John go and prepare for World News Tonight. Thank you, John, for being here.
Just going to add on that note that there are plenty of members of Congress that think it would be a terrible idea for him to fire Robert Mueller, but they could pass legislation to protect the special counsel. There's a lot of questions on Capitol Hill today about...
I start with you. Facebook handles extensive amounts of personal data for billions of users. A significant amount of that data is shared with third-party developers who utilize your platform. As of early this year, you did not actively monitor whether that data was transferred by such developers to other parties. Moreover, your policies only prohibit transfers by developers to parties seeking...
whether they should pursue legislation to make sure that the president can't go that route.
You know, the one thing I would say, on the one hand, the president is clearly frustrated in the sense that if you believe, as he said, that he did not collude, no one on his staff...
to profit from such data. Number one, besides Professor Kogan's transfer and now potentially CubeU, do you know of any instances where user data was improperly transferred to that
he knows of in terms of the campaign colluded, that this is sort of a cloud hanging over his administration, and he's frustrated by it. On the other hand, you're hearing some of the critics today, including some people in law enforcement and former law enforcement, that the president, to attack Jeff Sessions, the Attorney General, to attack Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein, to attack Bob Mueller, and to say that they broke into the office of his attorney. Those words, they say, carry weight.
Party in breach of Facebook's terms. If so, how many times has that happened? And was Facebook only made aware of that transfer by some third party?
Mr. Chairman, thank you. As I'm
with them in the sense of that's not what happened. A federal judge approved the search warrant. And it's those kind of things that are, creating, I think, more suspicions among some in law enforcement than there otherwise would be because of statements like that.
And as mentioned, we're now conducting a full investigation into every single app that had access to a large amount of information before we locked down platform to prevent developers from accessing this information around 2014. We believe that we're going to be investigating
his Justice Department. These are his officials that are still overseeing it, including Rod Rosenstein and, of course, the Attorney General. It was such an extraordinary thing last night, guys, because the press was told to gather last night for a meeting of the president's consigliere around the war, potential wartime.
Many apps, tens of thousands of apps, and if we find any suspicious activity, we're going to conduct a full audit of those apps to understand how they're using their data and if they're doing anything improper. And if we find that they're doing anything improper, we'll ban them from Facebook, and we will tell everyone affected. As for past activity, I don't have all the examples of apps that we've banned here, but if you'd like, I can have my team follow up with you after this.
Okay. Have you ever required an audit to ensure the deletion of improperly transferred data? And if so, how many?
Cabinet, right, about reacting in Syria. And here's what happened. The president went off a little bit unprompted. Take a look at some of what happened last night.
I have this witch hunt constantly going on for over 12 months now, and it's a disgrace. It's frightening.
Many times.
Mr. Chairman, Yes, we have. I don't have the exact figure on how many times we have, but overall, the way we've enforced our platform policies in the past is we have looked at patterns of how
Frankly, a real disgrace. It's an attack on our country in a true sense. The Attorney General made a terrible mistake when he did this and when he recused himself, or he should have certainly let us know if he was going to recuse himself, and we would have put a different Attorney General in. So he made what I consider to be a very terrible mistake for the country. Why don't I just fire Mueller? Well, I think it's a disgrace what's going on. We'll see what happens, but I think it's really a sad situation when you
have used our APIs and accessed information, as well as looked into reports that people have made to us about apps that might be doing sketchy things. Going forward, we're going to take a more proactive position on this and do much more regular spot checks and other reviews.
You look at what happened, and many people have said you should fire him. Again, they found nothing. And in finding nothing, that's a big statement.
And Pierre, is there anything in these statements that we've heard from the president when
use of apps, as well as increasing the amount of audits that we do? And again, I can make sure that our team follows up with you on anything about the specific past stats that would be interesting.
I was going to assume that sitting here today, you have no idea. And if I'm wrong on that, you're telling me, I think, that you're able to supply those figures to us, at least as of this point.
Mr. Chairman, I will have my team follow up with you on what information we have.
When he vents like this, his frustration, is there any in that could actually be used by Robert Mueller in a potential obstruction of justice probe?
I mean, the short answer is it's unclear, but there's some legal scholars who've been watching this unfold and say the very nature of creating.
Okay, but right now you have no certainty of whether or not, how much of that's going on, right? Okay. Facebook collects massive amounts of data from consumers, including content, networks, contact.
Pressure.
Right.
That at minimum, you're putting pressure on the Attorney General, you're putting pressure on the Deputy Attorney General, and you're putting pressure out there in regards to Bob Mueller in terms of, disgrace, breaking into the office. That there are some people that say, are you, creating undue pressure to impede the ongoing investigation? There are some people, including the President's counsel, who apparently have told him, just look, be quiet about this, let this investigation unfold, and then the results will be what they are.
All right.
Device information, location, and information from third parties. Yet your data policy is only a few pages long and provides consumers with only a few examples of what is collected and how it might be used. The examples given...
Pierre, we'll let you get back to the beat. Appreciate you being with us. Over on Capitol Hill, as we speak, you're looking at a live picture of Mark Zuckerberg testifying before Congress, his opening statement. A pretty extraordinary scene in the United States Senate today, Mary Alice, because you have this joint...
Emphasize benign uses, such as connecting with friends, but your policy does not give any indication for more controversial issues of such data. My question... Why doesn't Facebook disclose to its users all the...
Two committees of the Senate, almost half of the Senate is set to question the Facebook founder and CEO in a few minutes in the hearing today. They'll play out tomorrow as well. Mary Alice, before we chat about that, we're getting Mary Bruce from the hearing room.
Ways the data might be used by Facebook and other third parties, and what is Facebook's responsibility to inform users about that information?
Mr. Chairman, I believe it's important to tell people exactly how the information that they share on Facebook is going to be used. That's why every single time you go to share something on Facebook, whether it's a photo in Facebook or a message in Messenger or WhatsApp, every single time there's a control right there about who you're going to be sharing it with.
Itself, and what's the body language been so far? Give us a check on how Zuckerberg, wearing a tie and a suit, not, a little bit different than his normal uniform. How's it going over so far from what you can tell?
Yeah, well, look, he does come armed with that suit. Gone is the usual gray T-shirt that we...
Whether it's your friends or public or a specific group, and you can change that and control that in line. To your broader point about the privacy policy, this gets into an issue that I think we and others in the tech industry have found challenging.
Always see him in, and of course he's armed with an apology. We heard him come straight out the bat here, taking responsibility, saying that he has made mistakes, that he's willing to make changes. The question now is just how many changes, what kind of changes, and are they the kind of changes that lawmakers are looking for? So many of the 44 senators that he is being questioned by today here want more robust oversight. They feel that things have gotten a little out of hand, to say the least, and they want to change the dynamic, the fundamental relationship between some of these tech companies and federal oversight.
Which is that long privacy policies are very confusing. And if you make it long and spell out all the detail, then you're probably going to reduce the percent of people who read it and make it accessible to them. So one of the things that we've struggled with over time is to make
site. Now, is Mark Zuckerberg willing to go that far? How much is he willing to agree to? That's what you're going to see so many lawmakers here pushing him on. Now, as for the body language, I have to tell you, look, it is a media circus down here today, in part because you just have so many lawmakers here. I mean, as you were saying, nearly half of the...
Something that is as simple as possible so people can understand it, as well as giving them controls in line in the product in the context of when they're trying to actually use them, taking into account that we don't expect that most people will want to go through and read a full legal document.
Senator Nelson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yesterday when we talked, I gave the relatively harmless example that I'm communicating with my friends on Facebook and indicate that
the entire U.S. Senate is going to be taking a stab at questioning Zuckerberg today. And I have to tell you, we've been here all morning. People were lining up, members of the public were lining up at dawn. The line stretches all the way down the Senate Hart Office building. A lot of people interested in getting a front row seat.
I love a certain kind of chocolate. And all of a sudden, I start receiving advertisements for chocolate. What if I don't want to receive
this? And we do know that reportedly Zuckerberg's been doing his preparation. The New York Times reports that he's been running through mock hearings, some of his advisors acting as members of Congress to press him to see how he responds. He's trying to convey a bit more of a humble tone than perhaps we've usually seen from him. Look, he's not someone who's known for his approachability. Anyone who saw Saturday Night Live last weekend saw them take a stab at him on that one. But he's known as someone who carefully controls his media access, carefully controls the image he
receive those commercial advertisements. So your chief operating officer, Ms. Sandberg, suggested on the NBC Today show that Facebook users who
presents to the public, and look, 4 or 5 hours in front of Congress is not exactly what he's used to say the very least.
Yeah, it is quite a scene playing out, and we're going to keeping an eye on it right here at abcnews.com. Mary Bruce, thanks for being here. And Mary Alice, it does seem like a major moment.
Do not want their personal information used for advertising, might have to pay for that protection, pay for it. Are you actually considering having Facebook users?
For Facebook, for tech, for the relationship with Washington. A lot of questions are going to come his way about Cambridge Analytica. A lot of questions are going to come his way about Russian interference in the election. Facebook was a vehicle for a whole lot of bad things that were happening over the last.
Pay for you not to use that information?
Senator, people have a control over how their information is used in ads in the product today. So if you want to have an experience where your ads aren't targeted using all the information that we have available, you can turn off third-party information. What we've found is that even though some people don't like ads, people really don't like ads that aren't relevant. And
last year, 2 years in politics.
And these members want answers. While we've been chatting, I got a text from a senior sort of political aide that works for one of those members of Congress in the room who said he was frustrated that Zuckerberg didn't seem to know much, or at least wasn't letting on to much.
While there is some discomfort, for sure, with using information in making ads more relevant, the overwhelming feedback that we get from our community is that people would rather have us show relevant content there than not.
people want to know now, what are the steps going forward? And so what will probably matter a whole lot more than these few days of political theater will be what regulations, if any, go in place ahead of the midterms, ahead of 2020, to change the relationship between campaigns and political advertising and this free giant platform.
Giant platform, indeed. All right, other big story of the week, Syria. We saw the president starting his reaction over the weekend, going through last night. We're joined now by Stephanie Ramos, our correspondent who's covering the Pentagon.
So we offer this control that you're referencing. Some people use it. It's not the majority of people on Facebook. And I think that's a good level of control to offer. I think what Cheryl was saying was that in order to not run ads at all.
And Stephanie, what stage is the planning at right now? What are the possible options that the U.S. military is talking about in terms of responding to that humanitarian disaster that the world witnessed over the weekend?
Well, Rick, right now we understand that military planners are still...
We would still need some sort of business model.
And that is your business model. So I take it that... and I use the harmless example of chocolate, but if it got into more personal thing, communicating with friends, and I want to cut it off, I'm going to have to pay you in order not to send me, using my personal information, something that I don't want. That
working on options for the president. U.S. intelligence officials are continuing to assess what type of nerve agent was used in that chemical attack in Dumas to firm up if the Assad regime is really responsible for that attack over the weekend.
Essence is what I understood Ms. Sandberg to say. Is that correct?
Yes, Senator. Although, to be clear, we don't offer an option today for people to pay to not show ads. We think offering an ad-supported service is the most aligned with our mission of trying to help connect everyone in the world.
Now, as far as Defense Secretary Mattis, we have not heard from him today, but we did hear from him yesterday where he said that the U.S. is not ruling out any type of attack against Syria. But he also said the U.S. needs to take a look at why chemical weapons are even being used in that region. Keep in mind, Syria has been supported by Russia for some time, and Russia itself has used chemical weapons since 2012. It is a war crime. It is a violation of international law, but it also needs to be verified.
Because we want to offer a free service that everyone can afford.
Okay.
That's the only way that we can reach billions of people. So,
therefore, you consider my personally identifiable data the company's data, not my data. Is that it?
And right now, the U.S. is working on that, working to collect evidence and really firm up exactly what happened over the weekend before there's any type of military response. Keep in mind, we do have, the U.S. has about...
No, Senator. Actually, at the first line of our terms of service say that you control and own the information and content that you put on Facebook.
Well, the recent scandal is obviously frustrating, not only because it affected 87 million, but because it seems to be part of a pattern of lax data practices by the company going back years. So back in 2011,
2,000 troops in that region, and their safety is a big concern. Now, as far as strike options, officials here at the Pentagon are keeping that really close to the vest, as they should. But what we've learned so far is that
it was a settlement with the FTC, and now we discover yet another instance where the data was failed to be protected. When you discovered the Cambridge Analytica that had fraudulently obtained.
There is the USS Donald Cook. There's a ship out in the eastern Mediterranean that can launch Tomahawk missiles toward Syria, which is the exact type of missile that was used last year when President Trump ordered an attack against Syria. And there are a couple of different options. The U.S. can also send a submarine toward that area to launch, or a B-2 bomber, for instance, that could have a significant impact there in that region. Back over to you.
All right, Stephanie Ramos.
All of this information. Why didn't you inform those 87 million?
When we learned in 2015 that Cambridge Analytica had bought data from an app developer on Facebook that...
I was watching it for us over at the Pentagon, the president earlier this week promising that big price to pay by Syria. Not clear what can actually be accomplished or when. I just want to hit one other quick thing, Mary Alice, because we've covered so much about the White House chaos. Just over the weekend, Tom Bossert, the president's...
people had shared it with. We did take action. We took down the app, and we demanded that both the app developer and Cambridge Analytica delete and stop using any data that they had. They told us that they did this. In retrospect, it was clearly a mistake to believe them, and we should have followed up and done a full audit then, and that is not a mistake that we will make.
Yes, you did that, and you apologized for it, but you didn't notify them. And
a Homeland Security advisor was out with Martha Raddatz on the Sunday shows talking about the latest news of the day, including Syria. Word today that he's out, the latest to be caught in the revolving door around this presidency. Intriguingly, just over the weekend, he was asked in another interview about...
Do you think that you have an ethical obligation to notify 87 million Facebook users?
Senator, when we heard back from Cambridge Analytica that they had told us that they weren't using the data and had
staff stability, and he felt like things were okay. Things were starting to settle down, and yet he goes as well.
Right. He made a point of saying he thought that a lot of the turnover was going to quiet down. So it seems like this came as a surprise to a lot of people that work with him. And you're right, there's just this constant revolving door. You have to wonder how in the world the president is making decisions of this magnitude with a team that's constantly changing.
All right. What'd you learn today? What's your big takeaway?
That we need to go watch Mark Zuckerberg. I need to pop the popcorn. I'm so curious what he's saying. There's so much attention, so much.
Deleted it. We considered it a closed case. In retrospect, that was clearly a mistake. We shouldn't have taken their word for it, and we've updated our policies and how we're going to operate the company to make sure that we don't make that mistake again.
Did anybody notify the FTC?
No, Senator.
Information at stake and personal sort of relationships. That's the interesting thing about Facebook, is that everyone feels like they're a part of this story.
And we're going to be covering that at abcnews.com. You'll be able to watch it. For me, the point that John Karl made about all these people who are trying to tell the president don't...
For the same reason, that we'd considered it a closed case.
Senator Thune.
And Mr. Zuckerberg, would you do that differently today, presumably, in response to Senator Nelson's question?
Yes.
Having to do it over. This may be your first appearance before Congress, but it's not the first time that Facebook has faced tough questions about its privacy policies. Wired magazine recently noted that you have a 14-year history of apologizing for ill-advised decisions regarding user privacy, not unlike...
Don't fire Bob Mueller. Don't fire Bob Mueller. But nobody knows whether he's actually going to fire Bob Mueller or not, because he, as we heard very clearly from Sarah Sanders, believes he has the power to do this. He is clearly frustrated with how this direction, the direction of this investigation,
and clearly asking questions about his right or his ability,
like the one that you made just now in your opening statement. After more than a decade of promises to do better, how is today's apology different, and why should we trust Facebook to make the necessary...
to fire him? That's why she's giving answers about what legal analysts are telling them.
I think that's exactly right. All right, Mary Alice Parks, thank you all for being here on the Briefing Room. Download the ABC News app. You can keep watching at abcnews.com, including if you want to click over and watch that Zuckerberg testimony playing out over on Capitol Hill. That's it from here from ABC News. Thanks for watching.